The best way for us to understand the Babylonians and the Canaanites is to read the book of Joshua. Chapters 18 and 19 provide a lot of information. It let us know how the Canaanites, the Babylonians, treat their own citizens and how they treat strangers. This has not changed to this very day. The same way that they were behaving back then, they are behaving today. Let's read chapters 18 and 19 and see what we can learn. Joshua chapter 18. And Abraham rose and did all that God had ordered him. And he took the men of his household and those bought with his money, and he circumcised them, as the Lord had commanded him. And there was not one left whom he did not circumcise. And Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised in the flesh of their foreskin. 13 years old was Ishmael when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And in the third day, Abraham went out of his tent and sat at the door to enjoy the heat of the sun during the pain of his flesh. And the Lord appeared to him in the plain of Mamre, and sent 3 of his ministering angels to visit him. And he was sitting at the door of the tent, and he lifted his eyes and saw, and lo, 3 men were coming from a distance. And he rose up and ran to meet them. And he bowed down to them and brought them into his house. And he said to them, If now I have found favor in your sight, turn in and eat a morsel of bread. And he pressed them, and they turned in, and he gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he placed them under a tree at the door of the tent. And Abraham ran and took a calf, tender and good, and hastened to kill it, and gave it to his servant Eliezer to dress. And Abraham came to Sarah into the tent, and he said to her, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes to cover the pot containing the meat. And she did so. And Abraham hastened and brought before them butter and milk, beef and mutton, and gave it before them to eat, before the flesh of the calf was sufficiently done. And they did eat. And when they had done eating, one of them said to him, I will return to thee according to the time of life, and Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And the men afterward departed and went their ways to the places to which they were sent. In those days all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and of the whole 5 cities were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord, and they provoked the Lord before with their abominations, and they strengthened in aging abominably and scornfully before the Lord. And their wickedness and crimes were in those days great before the Lord. So we see right here in the first 11 verses, we see a contrast between the way our father Abraham treated the strangers that he saw coming down the road. He took the men, gave them water to wash their feet, and prepared a large meal for them, asking them to stay as long as they wanted to stay. But the other cities, the other nations that were in the area at the time, the nations of the Canaanites, they did not behave as Abraham did, as we read in verse 11. Verse 12. And they had in their land a very extensive valley, about half a day's walk, and in it there were fountains of water, and a great deal of herbage surrounding the water. And all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah went there 4 times in the year, with their wives and children, and all belonging to them. And they rejoiced there with timbrels and dances. And in the time of rejoicing, they would all rise and lay hold of their neighbors' wives, and some the virgin daughters of their neighbors, and they enjoyed them. And each man saw his wife and daughter in the hands of his neighbor, and did not say a word. And they did so from morning to night. And they afterward returned home, each man to his house, and each woman to her tent. So they always did 4 times in the year. Also, when a stranger came in to their cities and brought goods which he had purchased with a view to dispose them, the people of these cities would assemble, men, women, and children, young and old, and go to the man and take his goods by force, giving a little to each man until there was no end to all the goods of the owner which he had brought into the land. What we just read in verses 14 and 15 is that 4 times a year the Canaanites would have a party. And in this party, they would swap wives. Each man would enjoy his neighbor's wife. Each man would enjoy his neighbor's virgin daughter. This is what they did over and over and over again. Well, in today's society, in many of the cities that we know about, specifically in the Western world, this very thing goes on, where we get together and we swap wives. There's even a show about it called wife swapping, where the wives are swapped. This went on at the same scale and to a much larger degree at the time of the Canaanites. And even today, a lot of people are practicing this same bad habit of the Canaanites. And it was right there in the book of Joshua. Verse 16. Also, when a stranger came into their cities and brought goods which he had purchased with a view to dispose of there, the people of these cities would assemble, men, women, and children, young and old, and go to the man and take his goods by force, giving a little to each man until there was an end to all the goods of the owner which he had brought into the land. And if the owner of the goods quarreled with them, saying, "What is this work which you have done to me?" then they would approach to him one by one, and each would show him the little which he took, and taunt him, saying, "I only took that little which thou didst give me." And when he heard this from them all, he would arise and go from them in sorrow and bitterness of soul. When they would all arise and go after him and drive him out of the city with great noise and tumult. This goes on today. In today's Western societies, you have strangers that come into the country, that come into the land every day. Strangers that in many cases sold everything that they had in the nation that they are from in order to come, say, to America. But as soon as they get here, the money that they had put together, that they had spent a lifetime putting together, that money is taken from them very, very rapidly. A little bit goes to rent, a little bit goes to the light bill, a little bit goes to the gas bill, a little bit goes to gas, a little bit goes to your car insurance. Before you know it, little by little, all of your money is gone. Within a year, within 2 years, 3 years, you are flat broke. Everything you had is gone. And when you look around you, all you can see is this company saying that I only took a little bit, or that company saying I only took a little bit, but you have nothing. This is how the nations of the Babylonians treat strangers today, in the same way that the nations of the Babylonians treated strangers back then. Contrast that with the way Abraham treated the stranger. Contrast that with the way the Taino Indians of the island of Haiti treated Christopher Columbus when he came over for the first time in the Americas. Contrast that with the way Indians, Native Americans all over the Americas readily accepted all of the Europeans that were coming to shoreline after shoreline. In all of these cases, they provided each one of the Europeans that came in unto them with food, with shelter, with a warm bed to sleep in. This is how the Native Americans treated the Europeans when they first arrived. And what happened shortly after the arrival of the Europeans, the same populations of Native Americans was annihilated, decimated, reduced by over 95%. The book of Joshua tells us that this is how they behaved back then. This is how they treated strangers back then. And this is the way that they treat strangers today. Verse 18. And there was a man from the country of Elam, who was leisurely going on the road, seated upon his ass, which carried a fine mantle of diverse colors, and the mantle was bound with a cord upon the ass. And the man was on his journey, passing through the street of Sodom, when the sun set in the evening. And he remained there in order to abide during the night. But no one would let him into his house. And at that time there was in Sodom a wicked and mischievous man, one skillful to do evil, and his name was Hadad. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the traveler in the street of the city. And he came to him and said, Whence comest thou, and whither dost thou go? And the man said to him, I am traveling from Hebron to Elam, where I belong. And as I passed, the sun set, and no one would suffer me to enter his house, though I had bread and water, and also straw, and provender for my ass, and am short of nothing. And Hadad answered and said to him, All that thou shalt want shall be supplied by me, but in the street thou shalt not abide all night. And Hadad brought him into his house, and he took off the mantle from the ass with the cord, and brought them to his house. And he gave the ass straw and provender, whilst the traveler ate and drank in Hadad's house, and he abode there that night. And in the morning the traveler rose up early to continue his journey, when Hadad said to him, Wait, comfort thy heart with a morsel of bread, and then go. And the man did so, and he remained with him, and they both ate and drank together during the day, when the man rose up to go. And Hadad said to him, Behold, now the day is declining. Thou hadst better remain all night, that thy heart may be comforted. And he pressed him so that he tarried there all night. And on the second day he rose up early to go away. When Hadad pressed him, saying, Comfort thy heart with a morsel of bread, and then go. And he remained, and ate with him also the second day. And then the man rose up to continue his journey. And Hadad said to him, Behold, now the day is declining. Remain with me to comfort thy heart. And in the morning rise up early, and go thy way. And the man would not remain, but rose and saddled his ass. And whilst he was saddling his ass, the wife of Hadad said to her husband, Behold, this man has remained with us for 2 days, eating and drinking, and he has given us nothing. And now shall he go away from us without giving anything? And his dad said to her, Be silent. And the man saddled his ass to go. And he asked Hadad to give him the cord and the mantle to tie it upon the ass. And Hadad said to him, What sayest thou? And he said to him, That thou, my lord, shalt give me the cord and the mantle made with diverse colors, which thou didst conceal with thee in thy house, to take care of it. And Hadad answered the man, saying, This is the interpretation of thy dream. The cord which thou didst see means that thy life will be lengthened out like a cord. And having seen the mantle colored with all sorts of colors, means that thou shalt have a vineyard in which thou wilt plant trees of all fruits. And the traveler answered, saying, Not so, my lord, for I was awake when I gave thee the cord, and also a mantle woven with different colors, which thou didst take off the ass to put them by for me. And Hadad answered and said, Surely I have told thee the interpretation of thy dream, and it is a good dream, and this is the interpretation thereof. Now the sons of the men give me 4 pieces of silver, which is my charge for interpreting dreams, and of thee only I require 3 pieces of silver. And the man was provoked at the words of Hadad, and he cried bitterly, and he brought Hadad to Sirach, judge of Sodom. And the man laid his cause before Sirach, the judge, when Hadad replied, saying, It is not so, but thus the matter stands. And the judge said to the traveler, This man Hadad telleth thee the truth, for he is famed in the cities for the accurate interpretation of dreams. And the man cried at the word of the judge, and he said, Not so, my lord, for it was in the day that I gave him the cord and mantle which was upon the ass, in order to put them by in his house. And they both disputed before the judge, the one saying thus the matter was, the other declaring otherwise. And Hadad said to the man, Give me 4 pieces of silver, that I charge for my interpretation of dreams. I will not make any allowance, and give me the expense of the 4 meals that thou didst eat in my house. And the man said to Hadad, Truly I will pay thee for what I ate in thy house. Only give me the cord and mantle which thou didst conceal in thy house. And Hadad replied before the judge and said to the man, Did I not tell thee the interpretation of thy dreams? The cord means that thy days shall be prolonged like a cord, and the mantle that thou wilt have a vineyard in which thou wilt plant all kinds of fruit trees. This is the proper interpretation of thy dreams. Give me the 4 pieces of silver that I require as a compensation, for I will make thee no allowance. And the man cried at the words of Hadad, and they both quarreled before the judge. And the judge gave orders to his servants, who drove them rashly from the house. And they went away, quarreling from the judge. When the people of Sodom heard them, and they gathered about them, and they exclaimed against the stranger, and they drove him rashly from the city. And the man continued his journey upon his ass, with bitterness of soul, lamenting and weeping. And whilst he was going along, he wept at what had happened to him in the corrupt city of Sodom. You see how the stranger was treated in the city of Sodom, in the cities of the Canaanites, the Babylonians. A stranger is treated very, very harshly. Nobody was willing to take him in. Nobody was willing to give him a place to stay, or food, or water, or help him in any way, shape, or form. This is exactly what we see among the cities of the Canaanites today. Even right here in America, we see that when a stranger comes into the land, he gets nothing. If he does not have a place to stay, no one will open their doors to him. And if he doesn't have anything to eat, no one will offer him any food. In fact, he is not even permitted to beg in the streets. He will get arrested. He is driven from the streets, driven deeper, deeper into the wilderness, into the jungle, there to die. So the same things that were going on back then in the cities of the Canaanites, as we read in the book of Joshua, those same things are happening today. Those same things helps us to see who the nations and the cities of the Babylonians are. again, when you contrast that to the way strangers were received in, say, the Pacific Islands, how strangers were received along the coast of Africa, the western and lower eastern coast of Africa, you will see that strangers were received very, very differently. Strangers were received with open arms. Everybody offered everything that they had to the stranger: a house, a place to stay, and food to eat, a warm bed to sleep in. Now, the stranger in Sodom, he was not treated that way. The stranger in today's nations of the children of the Canaanites, the children of the Babylonians, in their nations, strangers are not treated that way. Nobody opens their doors. They are left out in the cold. And you see, when somebody does open their door, it is with deceit. It is with bad intentions. And when that person takes the person who has deceived them to court, the justice system in the cities of the Babylonians is just as corrupt as the individual citizens who live there. There is no justice to be found in the courts of the cities of the Canaanites, just like there is no justice to be found in the courts of the nations of the Western world today, of the children of the Canaanites today, the Gentiles. Let us continue now with chapter 19. Chapter 19. And the cities of Sodom had 4 judges to 4 cities, and these were their names: Sirach in the city of Sodom, Shokad in Gomorrah, Zabnak in Admah, and Menon in Zeboim. And Eliezer, Abraham's servant, applied to them different names, and he converted Sirach to Shakra, and Shokad to Shakrura, and Zebnak to Kezobim, and Menon to Matzlodin. And by desire of their 4 judges, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah had beds erected in the streets of the cities. And if a man came to these places, they laid hold of him and brought him to one of their beds, and by force made him to lie in them. And as he lay down, 3 men would stand at his head and 3 at his feet, and measure him by the length of the bed. And if the man was less than the bed, these 6 men would stretch him at each end. And when he cried out to them, they would not answer him. And if he was longer than the bed, they would draw together the 2 sides of the bed at each end, until the man had reached the gates of death. And if he continued to cry out to them, they would answer him, saying, Thus shall it be done to a man that cometh into our land. The same thing that happens here. What do we have in the cities of Babylon, of the Babylonians? We have immigration laws. We have walls. And in many cases, these are walls of iron. Because if you cross the border and are caught, you are placed in jail. You are placed behind bars. You are treated in this way, and sometimes even to the point of death. So again, we see that the cities of the Babylonians are behaving the same way today that they did back then. They used to torment and make strangers to suffer. They still torment strangers today. They still make strangers suffer today. Verse 7. And when men heard all these things that the people of the cities of Sodom did, they refrained from coming there. And when a poor man came to their land, they would give him silver and gold, and cause a proclamation in the whole city not to give him a morsel of bread to eat. And if the stranger should remain there some days and die from hunger, not having been able to obtain a morsel of bread, then at his death all the people of the city would come and take their silver and gold which they had given him. And those that could recognize the silver or gold which they had given him took it back, and at his death they also stripped him of his garments, and they would fight about them, and he that prevailed over his neighbor took them. So even when they gave money to the strangers, it was only to mock them. It was only to make them good for a moment in time. The intention was give them the money, but no food, no drink, no shelter, nothing else until he actually dies of starvation. Verse 10. They would after that carry him and bury him under some of the shrubs in the deserts. So they did all the days to anyone that came to them and died in their land. Potter's field. We have a lot of places in today's society that they reserve to bury strangers. They do not suffer to give strangers a proper burial in the cities of the Canaanites. And in the course of time, Sarah sent Eliezer to Sodom to see Lot and inquire after his welfare. And Eliezer went to Sodom, and he met a man of Sodom fighting with a stranger. And the man of Sodom stripped the poor man of all his clothes and went away. And this poor man cried to Eliezer and supplicated his favor on account of what the man of Sodom had done to him. And he said to him, Why dost thou act thus to the poor man who came to thy land? And the man of Sodom answered Eliezer, saying, Is this man thy brother? Or have the people of Sodom made thee a judge this day, that thou speakest about this man? We hear that today. Whenever one of us asks about our neighbor, usually we're told, Why are you worried about him? Don't worry about him. Take care of your own self. Take care of your own family, your own children. Whatever happens to him, happens to him. Verse 16. And Eliezer strove with the man of Sodom on account of the poor man. And when Eliezer approached to recover the poor man's clothes from the man of Sodom, he hastened and with a stone smote Eliezer in the forehead. And the blood flowed copiously from Eliezer's forehead. And when the man saw the blood, he caught hold of Eliezer, saying, Give me my hire for having rid thee of this bad blood that was in thy forehead, for such is the custom and the law in our land. And Eliezer said to him, Thou hast wounded me, and requirest me to pay thee for thy hire? And Eliezer would not hearken to the words of the man of Sodom. And the man laid hold of Eliezer, and brought him to Shachra, the judge of Sodom, for judgment. And the man spoke to the judge, saying, I beseech thee, my lord, thus has this man done, for I smote him with a stone, that the blood flowed from his forehead, and he is unwilling to give me my hire. And the judge said to Eliezer, This man speaketh truth to thee. Give him his hire, for this is the custom of our land. And Eliezer heard the words of the judge, and he lifted up a stone and smote the judge. And the stone struck on his forehead, and the blood flowed copiously from the forehead of the judge. And Eliezer said, If this then is the custom in your land, give thou unto this man what I should have given him, for this has been thy decision. Thou didst decree it. Now we see that Eliezer ended this somewhat humorously. But the idea is that the man that Eliezer had confronted, this man was doing wickedly. This man was doing wicked things to his neighbor. He robbed his neighbor, and he did a stranger, mind you, and he did horrible things to the stranger. And when Eleazar confronted him about it, he smote Eleazar with the stone. And when the blood came out of Eleazar's forehead, that's where he had hit him, he asked Eleazar to pay him for letting the bad blood out of his forehead. We see this happening in today's society today. People are injured every day, and the injured party is the one that ends up having to pay, even for his own injury. Very often you see in the cities of the Babylonians that when the injured person goes to court, he gets no justice from the court system. The court, in many cases, sides with the perpetrator of the crime. The court sides with the person that injures the stranger or the person that injures his neighbor, whether that person be an individual, an officer of the law, or a company or corporation. In many of these cases, there is no justice in the cities of the Canaanites, in the cities of the Babylonians. Verse 22. And Eleazar left the man of Sodom with the judge, and he went away. And when the kings of Elam had made war with the kings of Sodom, the kings of Elam captured all the property of Sodom, and they took Lot captive with his property. And when it was told to Abraham, he went and made war with the kings of Elam, and he recovered from their hands all the property of Lot, as well as the property of Sodom. At that time, the wife of Lot bare him a daughter, and he called her name Paltit, saying, Because God hath delivered him and his whole household from the kings of Elam. And Paltit, daughter of Lot, grew up, and one of the men of Sodom took her for a wife. And a poor man came into the city to seek maintenance, and he remained in the city some days. And all the people of Sodom caused a proclamation of their custom not to give this man a morsel of bread to eat until he dropped dead upon the earth. And they did so. And Paltit, the daughter of Lot, saw this man lying in the streets, starved with hunger, and no one would give him anything to keep him alive, and he was just upon the point of death. And her soul was filled with pity on account of the man, and she fed him secretly with bread for many days, and the soul of this man was revived. For when she went forth to fetch water, she would put the bread in the water pitcher. And when she came to the place where the poor man was, she took the bread from the pitcher and gave it to him to eat. So she did many days. And all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah wondered how this man could bear starvation for so many days. They were upset that this man was still alive. Verse 30. And they said to each other, This can only be that he eats and drinks, for no man can bear starvation for so many days, or live as this man has, without even his countenance changing. And 3 men concealed themselves in a place where the poor man was stationed, to know who it was that brought him bread to eat. And Paltit, daughter of Lot, went forth that day to fetch water, and she put bread into her pitcher of water, and she went to draw water by the poor man's place, and she took out the bread from the pitcher and gave it to the poor man, and he ate it. And the 3 men saw what Paltit did to the poor man, and they said to her, It is thou then who hast supported him, and therefore has he not starved, nor changed in appearance, nor died like the rest. And the 3 men went out of the place in which they were concealed, and they seized Paltit and the bread which was in the poor man's hand, and they took Paltit and brought her before their judges, and they said to them, Thus did she do. And it is she who supplied the poor man with bread. Therefore did he not die all this time. Now therefore declare to us the punishment due to this woman for having transgressed our law. You see how angry they were at this woman for not allowing the stranger to die. They even brought her up before the authorities. This very thing happens today. Today, restaurants are encouraged to throw away the food and not to give it to people who may be hungry, not to give it to the homeless. Restaurants are taught to throw away the food when they are done eating it. Likewise, if you live in an apartment building, there is an occupancy requirement. If you take in too many strangers, you might get a call from your landlord saying that too many people live in the house. You cannot give this person who doesn't have a place to live, you cannot give this otherwise homeless person a place to stay in your house. And so you see, even in today's society, strangers are treated ill in much the same way that they were treated in the days that this was written. And in many cases, you can be sued, you can be taken to court, you can be brought up on charges for helping and assisting your neighbor or a stranger, even if they are at the point to die. But what we learn in the book of Joshua is that is the very point of it. The very point is that the stranger should die. And the very point of these laws that the Canaanites have is that the stranger should die in a most horrific fashion, by starvation, by being placed in a bed and stretched until all of his limbs die or torn apart, in all of the horrible ways, in prison, in all of the horrible ways that you can imagine. This is what is actually programmed to happen in the cities of the Canaanites. It was programmed back then, and the program is still in force, still in effect today. Verse 35. And the people of Sodom and Gomorrah assembled and kindled a fire in the street of the city. And they took the woman and cast her into the fire, and she was burned to ashes. And in the city of Admah there was a woman to whom they did the like. You can lose your life for helping somebody in the cities of the Canaanites. Verse 36 again. And in the city of Admah there was a woman to whom they did the like. For a traveler came into the city of Admah to abide there all night, with the intention of going home in the morning. And he sat opposite the door of the house of the young woman's father, to remain there, as the sun had set when he had reached that place. And the young woman saw him sitting by the door of the house. And he asked her for a drink of water. And she said to him, Who art thou? And he said to her, I was this day going on the road, and reached here when the sun set. So I will abide here all night, and in the morning I will arise early and continue my journey. And the woman went into the house and fetched the man bread and water to eat and drink. And this affair became known to the people of Admah, and they assembled and brought the young woman before the judges, that they should judge her for this act. And the judge said, The judgment of death must pass upon this woman, because she transgressed our law, and this therefore is the decision concerning her. And the people of those cities assembled and brought out the young woman and anointed her with honey from head to foot, as the judge had decreed, and they placed her before a swarm of bees, which were then in their hives, and the bees flew upon her and stung her, that her whole body was swelled. And the young woman cried out on account of the bees, but no one took notice of her or pitied her, and her cries ascended to heaven. And the Lord was provoked at this, and at all the works of the cities of Sodom. And so the Canaanites, these cities of the Canaanites, of the Babylonians, had done so much to provoke, had done so much to their neighbors and to strangers, even to provoke the wrath of our Creator Himself, the wrath of our Father. And as we have just read, in each of these cases, these cities makes it a law. They legalize victimizing innocent people. They make it a law that you should be treated in this manner. And thereby, when you go to court, when you go to trial, then it is according to the law of the land that you were mistreated. It is according to the law of the land that you were brought to the point of death. The Canaanites do this so that they can give themselves the semblance of justice, so that they can tell themselves that they are right, so that they can tell you that they are simply following the law of the land. This is what we see today in all of the Babylonian cities. They write their laws in order to turn you into a victim. And then when you ask them, why are you treating me in a way that is contrary to the laws of justice, to the laws of our Father, they say, well, these are our laws. You are in our cities. These are our laws. And our laws permit us to steal from you, to rob from you, to sleep with your wife and your kids, and to kill you, and you can do nothing about it because it is the law of our land. Verse 46. Well, verse 44 again. And the Lord was provoked at this, and all the works of the cities of Sodom, for they had abundance of food, and had tranquility amongst them, and still would not sustain the poor and the needy. It's like, let's take the Western nations of Europe or America. Very, very, very rich nations. All of these nations becoming rich at the expense of the rest of the world. All of these nations full of money and resources, and yet they will not lift a finger to assist anybody else, to assist even the nations that they destroyed. And in those days, their evil doings and sins became great before the Lord. And the Lord sent for two of the angels that had come to Abraham's house to destroy Sodom and its cities. And the angels rose up from the door of Abraham's tent after they had eaten and drunk. And they reached Sodom in the evening. And Lot was then sitting in the gate of Sodom. And when he saw them, he rose to meet them. And he bowed down to the ground. And he pressed them greatly, and brought them into his house. And he gave them victuals which they ate. And they abode all night in his house. And the angels said to Lot, Arise, go forth from this place, thou and all belonging to thee, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of this city. For the Lord will destroy this place. And so we see, once the sins of a city, once the sins of a people, the sins of a nation reaches a certain level, once their cup overflows, the Father, the King of Israel, intervenes. He comes down, and in this case, he is about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And in our case today, he is about to destroy Babylon, the Babylonian Empire, and all their nations and their city-states to wit. Verse 47. Verse 49. And the angels laid hold upon the hand of Lot, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hands of his children, and all belonging to him. And they brought him forth, and set him without the cities. And they said to Lot, Escape for thy life. And he fled, and all belonging to him. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom, and upon Gomorrah, and upon all these cities, brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew these cities, all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities, and that which grew up upon the ground. And Ado, the wife of Lot, looked back to see the destruction of the cities, for her compassion was moved on account of her daughters, who remained in Sodom, for they did not go with her. And when she looked back, she became a pillar of salt. And it is yet in that place unto this day. And so, wife's Lot, who in Joshua we learn her name was Ado, Lot's wife turned around. And when she turned around, she became a pillar of salt. Basically, what happened is that Lot's wife could not see herself leaving Babylon. Her daughters were there, but so were all her friends. So was all of her property. So was all of the good things that she had accumulated over the years. So was her Mercedes Benz. So was her fine jewelry. So was her precious electronic equipment. All of these things were in Sodom. And Lot and Sodom's wife, and Lot's wife rather, could not see herself leaving those things behind. And therefore, instead of keeping her focus on refuge, on safety, she turned around because she coveted those things, and she became a pillar of salt. Well, in today's world, we know that the kingdom of God is coming. And when that day comes, we ought to go straight for the kingdom. We are not to turn around. When that day comes for us to leave Babylon and to go and wait for the Father in the isles of the sea, to go wait for the kingdom of God, in that day, many of us will not be able to leave Babylon. Many of us will be thinking about our Mercedes Benz, our fancy apartments, our house, our fine clothes, our jewelry, our lifestyle, our friends, and we will turn around. We will not want to leave Babylon, and many of us will perish the same way that Lot's wife perished. Because, as the Messiah said, those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life shall save it. If you leave Babylon, if you lose Babylon, then you will have a chance of saving your life. Verse 53 again. And when she looked back, she became a pillar of salt, and it is yet in that place unto this day. And the oxen which stood in that place daily licked up the salt to the extremities of their feet, and in the morning it would spring forth afresh, and they again licked it up unto this day. And Lot and two of his daughters that remained with him fled and escaped to the cave of Adullam, and they remained there for some time. And Abraham rose up early in the morning to see what had been done to the cities of Sodom. And he looked and beheld the smoke of the cities going up like the smoke of a furnace. And Lot and his two daughters remained in the cave, and they made their father drink wine, and they lay with him, for they said there was no man upon earth that could raise up seed from them, for they thought that the whole earth was destroyed. And they both lay with their father, and they conceived and bare sons, and the firstborn called the name of her son Moab, saying, From my father did I conceive him. He is the father of the Moabites unto this day. And the younger also called her son Ben-Ammi. He is the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. And after this, Lot and his two daughters went away from there, and he dwelt on the other side of the Jordan with his 2 daughters and their sons. And the sons of Lot grew up, and they went and took themselves wives from the land of Canaan, and they begat children, and they were fruitful and multiplied. Here we see how the children of Moab and the children of Ammon were born. The children of Moab were born from Lot and his daughter, from a union of Lot and his daughter. His 2 daughters had thought that the entire world was destroyed, and so they were afraid that they would never have children, and they were afraid that there is nobody else on the earth, and that they needed to have kids. So they went in unto their father. They gave Lot wine. They went in unto Lot, and the first one had a child, and she named him Moab. And Moab means son of the father. And the second one was named Benami, or Ammon. And so the book of Joshua has a lot to offer us. And right now, today, we just learned that the book of Joshua tells us everything we need to know about the cities of Babylon, about the cities of Canaan, about the Canaanites, about how they treat their citizens, about how they treat strangers. So, if you are in a land now that has immigration laws, that seeks very hard to keep people out, and then when the people come in, they either put them in jail or treat them badly to the point that they are left destitute to the point of death. If this happens to you, then you are in a city of the Babylonians. You are in a nation of the Babylonians, or a nation in which the Babylonians dominate. As we can see, when Christopher Columbus first came to the Americas, we know that there were over 2,000 nations of Native Americans living already in the Americas. And we know that each one of these nations treated the Europeans very gently, treated all strangers, including the Europeans, with open arms, gave them a place to stay, gave them a bed to sleep in, and fed them all the days that they were visitors in that nation. That's because these nations are the nations of the children of Jacob. These nations are the nations of the children of Abraham through Jacob, not the children of the Canaanites, not the nations of the Canaanites. And what happened? The Europeans came in and destroyed all of these nations and replaced them with oppressive governments, with oppressive judges, princes, kings, and rulers.